Well, here's another cool old radio project. I don't know if this is going to be much of a project because it may work, but I may post it anyway. This is one given to me by my good friend Al, who is still cleaning out his basement, and I seem to be the happy recipient of many of his old radios that he's collected. This one is an RCA Model 8 BT6, I believe from the mid-30s, based on the types of tubes that it's got in there, all octals. And this was a farm radio. It's already got a power supply in it, so I assume it was probably restored about the same time that power supply was put in it. But I mean, here's where the batteries, I guess, would have gone right in here. That's why the cabinet's so big. So I think I'll clean this up a little bit and maybe fire it up on the dim bulb tester and see if it works. It looks like this power supply was built by Chucks of West Virginia. I doubt they're still in business. Probably, what, back in the 60s maybe? Now I'll see if I can figure that out based on some date codes, but I'll see if it works. Alright. Got the isolation transformer on. Dim bulb tester. And let's fire this guy up. Sounds like it's working. Now, the volume pot's a little dirty, but outside of that it seems to work okay. So I think I'll pull the chassis and just check underneath and make sure all the old capacitors have been swapped out. And this will be a quick service. Well, I got the radio pulled out of the cabinet. Down there. And this is the farm radio. There's the power supply, which, based on some of the date codes of the capacitors, looks like it was made in the middle 90s. So it's 30 years old, but it seems to be working. I'm not seeing 6 volts going to the lamp, so I'll have to check to see if that's a power supply problem or some other wiring problem. But the tubes on this are actually a little older than what I thought. I thought they were octals, but they're all 4, 5, and 6 pin, old, 2-volt filament tubes, 2-digit tubes mostly. There's a couple 49s for the output tubes. So I've got my Hickok 6000 tester with the old island set up on it so that I can measure those. So I'll go ahead and test them, see how they look. And another surprise too is I thought this was probably restored when it was converted from a farm radio to having an external power supply. But as you can see, there's all the old original wax paper capacitors that are still in there. So this will need a recap. And it's got this little square thing here, square capacitor. Looks like it's I think it's 2 8 microfarad capacitors in there. I'll have to maybe look at the schematic and dig through it. And right here is something I don't recognize. I don't even know what these are. So I'll look at some more of the documentation, try to figure that out. Anyway, it's going to require more work than I thought, even though it's working. I don't really trust these old wax capacitors here, because these old tubes, I don't want to burn them out, because these old 2-digit tubes are getting hard to come by. Tested all the tubes on the radio, cleaned them all up. And see, on the two output tubes, they're not matched. One's reading 600 micromos and one's reading 850. So I don't have any 49s, so I'll just have to go with that. This 30 is really weak. It's reading 300. It should be 900. I do have one of those, or a couple of those, and one's almost brand new, or reads like a new one, so I'll probably replace that after recapping the radio. The two IF tubes here are reading like very good, very like new ones, so lucky there. And the rest of these, some of them are weak, but you know, the detector tube and the oscillator tube and stuff, they're all, I think they're going to be okay. So I'll probably just replace this one here, the driver tube, and all the capacitors, of course, and see if that gets it playing a little bit better. I've been poking around in this battery farm radio, I call these things. I lubricated up and cleaned up all the controls, so everything's working good. And the radio does work with this battery eliminator power supply, but it's only supplying what, 135 volts B plus, and then the 2 volts heater current for all the tubes. And as I was reading through the document, I started talking about additional batteries, like a C battery, and then some special bias cells. So the C battery is supposed to produce 7 volts, and the bias cells 4 volts. Now here's that C battery, and I think you can just read that it looks like there's a date there of 8 of 1935. So I may be going out on a limb here, but I'm assuming that that battery is probably not any good anymore. And so it's weird that they actually have the battery attached to the chassis, so you have to pull the chassis out to change that battery. So and I did measure, you know, on the circuit where I should have seen the bias voltage of 7 volts, and it's not there, of course. So I pulled this off, disconnected it, thinking, well, maybe that battery's not there anymore, but nope, there it is. The original 1935 7 volt battery. So I'm going to see if I can extract that thing and see what it looks like. It's obviously not working anymore, and I'll figure out what to do about biasing the radio. Alright, got the battery out of this rusty cover. I may have to clean that up a little bit. There it is. There's a real antique. It actually says Radio C battery, number 773, 7.5 volts. Yeah, I think that thing's probably dead. Let's measure and see. Okay, I got the meter out. Let's see what this battery has in it. And surprisingly, it's actually got something there. About 0.6 volts on each of these taps. Just going down, it's got different voltages. You had minus 7.5 over here, minus 6, minus 4. So we go across the main thing, about 0.6 volts. Pretty surprising. I don't know if you can read this. See if I get the right light on it. But it says, let's see, for best results put in service before February of 1944. So yeah, I think that one's beyond its use by date. And also, earlier I said I couldn't figure out what these guys were here. And those are actually another little bias cells. I guess they're small little batteries of some type. They're not putting out anything either. But they, let's see if I get close enough. right here in the schematic. This is, four bias cells, or 4 cells, and they provide a negative bias to some of these tubes. And then over here, where is it? Oh, there it is. There's where the negative bias of the C battery comes in. See, there's a 7.5 volt tap and a 3 volt tap. So that's what I'll have to come up with. And I was kind of wondering why this radio comes on so fast. It's like it has no warm-up time. And then I noticed all of these tubes are directly heated cathodes. So that must be the reason why it comes on so fast. And maybe an additional aspect too is they're all 2 volt tubes. So maybe they just heat up quicker than 6 or 12 volt tubes. But it is pretty much an instant on. Once you flip the switch, it starts making noise within a couple seconds. Pretty cool. Okay, I think I finally decided what I'm going to do with the bias voltages on the farm radio. Since this battery's no longer any good, and the little cells underneath, they call them bias cells, are no longer good anyway. And they're 4 volts. They produce about 4 volts, and this produces 7.5 volts, and it also uses the 3 volt tap. I was worried about using batteries because I thought they'd go dead. But then I started using my power supply up there to bias the radio. I discovered by using some current measurements that thing basically draws no current, like a 1 microamp or something. So it just produces a voltage for bias and with no current flow. So a regular battery would last for a very long time. So what I decided to do is order some AA battery holders and just kind of wire those up and produce the voltages that I need. So those should be coming tomorrow. So I think that's what I'm going to do, and I'll try that out. I still need to recap the radio and get that going. And I also have an IPA review. Haven't done one of these in a while. That's Lagunitas IPA. It's made out in Petaluma, California. And this stuff is available pretty much nationwide. I'm here on the East Coast and I can get it. And in a lot of places it's available on tap too. If you can't get a local IPA, a lot of times you can get a Lagunitas, and it's always good. So that's another one I would recommend. And I guess it's time to start recapping the radio. There's all the capacitors that got replaced, including this early can style double electrolytic. There's 2 8 microfarads in there. Haven't put the sides back on yet. That sure made it a lot easier to get down in here and replace all these capacitors. So you can see the orange drops have replaced all of the paper waxies that were in there. Here's still a couple of these. I think those are ceramics, so I think they should be okay. And I haven't checked all the resistors. There's some old dog bone style in there, so I may have to go through and just double check those, see how they are. But usually they don't vary by too much. So I got the bias cells replaced here temporarily with some little AA's. So this was the 4 volt set. You can see those little cups. These little batteries sat in there. I don't know what technology that was, but apparently it produced low voltage at very low current. So that's 4 volts there. And over here I've got 6 volts right now, but I'll put one more in to make it 7.5. And that's going in, and there's a 3 volt tap that also has to, it's being used as a biasing of the tubes. So if I turn this on, I'm still amazed at how quickly those directly heated 2-volt tubes start conducting. It's almost an instant on. But this seems to be working. It's got a little bit of a hum, but working fairly well. So I think what I will do is flip this back over, wire up the bias voltages and figure out how I'm going to mount those, and then get it ready to go back in the cabinet. Alright, I got the radio mounted back in the cabinet, and I put the original little power supply, the battery replacement power supply right there. And there's my that's the minus 4 volt, 4.5 volt bias cells, and that's the minus 7 and minus 3 volt bias cells. So that's how I wound up mounting those, and I'll just use these AA's. I think it's very low current draw. So I was trying to figure out a way to make the lights work on the front here to light up the scale, but they're 2.5 volt lights, and originally they had a separate switch so that they wouldn't draw battery current. You could just tune it at night and then flip that off. But so I wired it up to the 2.5 volt supply from this little supply here that lights up all the tube filaments, and that extra current just drew the supply down and wouldn't put out 2.5 volts anymore. So I tried LEDs, but I couldn't find an LED that would light up at 2 volts, so I'll do something later on with it, but for now I just don't have lamps installed. So, and I still need to replace this tube right here, and I've got a replacement for it. This one was I think overheated because it had no bias voltage on it since the bias supply was missing for so many years. So I still need to replace that, but I will do that. So let's go ahead and fire this up. And again, this thing warms up almost instantaneously. It's pretty surprising. I guess that's what happens with directly heated vacuum tubes, but they really go quickly. So this has still got a hum to it, you can hear. And I'm not sure why, because unless it's just picking it up from these lights, or maybe from the power supply, because you know the set is all DC, so shouldn't be getting any 60 cycles in there, but maybe this thing's noisy and it's picking that up. But after I replace that number 30 tube, this guy will be done, and I'll find a place to put them upstairs for display and for occasionally listening. And I still need to clean up the case a little bit, but I can tell it was restored a few years back because it was re-glued, and you can see there's a few cracks here that were filled, but it looks pretty nice. So that's it on the RCA 8BT6 farm radio from, I forgot the date now, in the 30s, I guess. It's working pretty well.